Everyone, I'm Nikki and welcome to the final lesson in our Fundamentals of Print Design course. Now that we've gone through all of the steps, all of design principles, the elements, actually formatting our brochure and getting it ready for print, it's time for the grand finale, and that's saving it out and getting it ready to send off to print. Now, before we get started with the actual exporting of the PDF, I want to show you some options here. And then I'm going to show you my go-to PDF preset that I use probably 99% of the time. It's so handy. And it works flawlessly for most of my print projects. And the key thing to remember with that is that I tend to work with printers all over. And some of them are local, some of them are national, and not all of them have the latest and greatest technology. So the preset that I choose is the most universal that I've run across that allows me to send a project to virtually any printer without any problem. And it's that same preset each time. So it's a huge time saver. But I want to show you that when you're ready to go, you would normally go to File, Export. And then you have the option to save your PDF like so. But before we do that, there's a couple of steps that we need to set up first for our PDF preset. And then once you set them up, it's ready to go each time. So with that, the very first thing that we're going to set up is a transparency flattener. And this is going to save us time from having to go through and hand outline all of this text when we save our PDF. Now, why do we outline our text? The number one reason is because we can't ensure that every printer we use is going to have the font that we're using. So by flattening your text, you're eliminating that problem of fonts. So with that, we are going to go to Edit, Transparency Flattener Presets. Now, once you set this as an option and a preset in your InDesign, it will forever be there until you remove it. So you do not have to do this step every single time you're saving your PDF. So when you open this up, here are your presets. Now, these three are defaults in InDesign. You have your low resolution, medium resolution, and high resolution. And you'll notice that I have something called High Res Outlines. This is my default PDF preset for my transparency flattener, and I'll show you what you need to do. If this isn't in here, you would just hit New and create your own here. But I'm going to go to Edit and show you my settings. One, I've named it High Res Outlines because we are still going to maintain the highest resolution possible with this, but this is what's going to outline our text. So all of this would be, your vectors would be at 100, this would stay at 1200 ppi and 300 ppi. The only thing that you're really changing here is the name, and then you're going to check Convert All Text to Outlines. When you hit New, that's not checked. So you are going to want to make sure that you convert all of your text to outlines. And you can leave the strokes alone. So then you hit OK. So now that you have this preset ready to go, this will stay here as an option for your PDFs from this point forward, and then you would just hit OK. So the next step before we save out our PDF is to create something for that transparency flattener to adhere to when you actually save out your PDF. Now this step you will repeat in every print project. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to your master page. And I'm going to go to A, and I put this on the master page because we need this to appear on every single page. If you do not put this on every single page, you will have a problem with flattening out your text. So just go to your A master, and it is blank in this document, and I'm going to go to Layers and create a new layer. And it should appear red if you don't have any other layers. And I'm going to drag this below my layer 1. So everything, if you have more than one layer, make sure that this layer is below any other layer. It needs to be underneath everything. So now we have our new layer underneath all of our content. Go back to your pages, A master. I'm going to zoom out here. And then you're going to go to your rectangle tool. And then you're going to drag out a rectangle, and it's going to fill with whatever color you had last. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but just make sure that it extends beyond all of your lines and all of your bleeds. So go ahead and select that and make sure that it's just white and that it doesn't have a stroke. So we're just looking for a plain white rectangle. Then we're going to right click on that rectangle, and here's where the magic happens. You go to transparency and make sure your opacity is set to 0. And then I usually go back to this layer and lock it to make sure that I accidentally don't grab it, I don't interact with it after this point. So this could either be the very first step that you do when you create a new document, or it can be the very last step before you save out your PDF, whichever's easiest for you to remember. One thing that will happen as you create brochures or print documents and you have templates, it's better to actually put this at the beginning, because then it's just a natural step for you and it's ready to go when you're done. But it's whatever works for you. And as you create documents and reuse the documents, this layer will be active in all of them, so you get to the point where you're not having to do this step as often. But if you're starting with a brand new document, you will need to make sure that you create that white rectangle and lower the opacity. So just to show you, it hasn't done anything to our document. It's not making this big white block. If you see a white block, for example, if I undo this and go back in here and say I forgot the transparency part, which is the crucial one, but if I forgot that, if it's underneath, you're not going to see anything. But of course, if the layer's above everything, then you will block out everything. See? So if you see a white rectangle, then you know that layer is above everything else. So it needs to drag below. The other thing is if you accidentally forget to create a layer, and this layer doesn't exist, and you create that white layer, that white box on your layer, you're going to have that same problem where it blocks out everything. So you need to make sure that you create a new layer, drag it down, and then you can take, with your white rectangle selected, drag that to the bottom layer, and then make sure that your transparency is set to 0. And then it's back. So that's just a couple things if you do run into some issues, some troubleshooting of that. But once you do this a few times, it really becomes second nature to you. And that's it. Now we're ready to save out our brochure in the final format. So from here, you would go to File, Export, and then you would go ahead and name your document however you want to and hit Save. And then you have your PDF options. Let's go through this really quickly. By default, you're going to see your high quality print. You're going to see as well, press quality, smallest file size, and these are all of my own in here. Now, what is the difference between high quality and press quality? Most people get confused and think that they want a high quality print, but really that is not the correct preset to use for something that's going to go to a printer. So you will always use press quality. So if you do not have a default preset set, then you would go to press quality and then we would fill in the blanks. As you can see, I have one called outlined press quality, and this is my default preset that we're going to make right now. So go to press quality if this is your first time doing this, and then just set this standard to 2001. This is going to be the universal standard for almost any printer that you use. Now, I will advise you to talk to your printer and make sure that you have their specifics. This is just going to be the overall universal approach that'll get you a successful print job 99% of the time. So we're going to make that 2001. That is fine. We do want to save out both pages, and we probably only want to have optimized for fast web preview checked. Everything else can stay unchecked. Under compression, this can change as well because this is going to affect the file size. Now, the only time that I change this to a bicubic downsampling is if I have to email my PDF and I just need to make that file size dramatically smaller without affecting the quality. But by default, I'm going to say do not downsample because I do not want to change anything with the original quality of my images. So I'm just going to have that to do not downsample. If you create a humongous file, then the first step would be to just change that to bicubic downsampling, and it won't drastically change the quality, but it'll affect the file size. And then if you have to, you can change that to high. But by default, let's go ahead and keep this to maximum and do not downsample. The next step is our marks and bleeds. Again, printers have all kinds of preferences for this. I just sent out a magazine and they really did not want me to use crop marks. So you will have to get your printer's permission on this, what they want. By default though, I usually set my crop marks, my registration marks, and my color bars. Just by default. If you need to, you can also add your page information. So not every printer is going to want all this info, but if you don't have a preference from them, these are kind of the standards that I use. And definitely make sure that you use your document bleed, that 1/8 of an inch all the way around. Your output, this is where the beauty of that CMYK color conversion comes into play. This does depend on where you're located. So this is a US setting, but if you're in another country, you're going to have your own presets on this. But this is going to convert all of our colors to CMYK by default. It's a beautiful thing that's going to save so much time in the long run. So we're going to convert to destination, preserve numbers, and we're saying that our destination is a default CMYK US web-coded swap version 2. So that is just the default CMYK color process for printers in the US. You can see other options down here, but this is what we're going to leave it at. If you need to get any more detailed, you can go into your ink manager, but this is going to be the default that gets you through. And just make sure that in your PDFX profile that you are also matching that CMYK color space. These should match. Okay? And then under advanced, this is where we set that transparency flattener that we said we wanted to convert the text to outlines. By default, it says medium resolution, but you should see your new preset here that we just made a moment ago in this drop-down. That's what you would select, and that's going to take that text and convert it to outlines for us in the PDF process versus having to do it manually. Again, beautiful thing, giant time saver. And then security and summary is all by default. Now, just make sure that you don't have any warnings down here. If you follow this exactly, you shouldn't have any warnings. And then what you want to do is save this preset, and I'm going to call it Outline Press Quality. And then go ahead and say default. Something like that. You can name this whatever you want. But this will alert you that this is your default go-to preset. Outline Press Quality Default. I know that when I'm working on a print project, this is going to be my default. And then when you're ready to go, you just hit export. And it's going to do everything that we need it to do to create that final PDF. It may take a second, just depends on how big your document is. So this is our final PDF. We have our color bars here. We have our crop marks here. This is going to tell the printer where our bleed is. We have registration marks. I cannot select this text. If I can select this text, something went wrong in that process of creating the transparency flattener with that white rectangle. If you can select the text, something went wrong with that. So go back through and redo those steps. And it does take a couple of times. I've had that happen when I first started with that. Something didn't jive right, so I could select the text. But that's a good test to know whether you did it correctly. If you can select this, then you didn't do it correctly. So now we have a finished PDF that's ready to send to print. The final lesson that we're going to talk about is going to be how to apply everything that you've learned in this lesson to any upcoming project. The crucial thing about all of this and all of our lessons is that everything you learn should be easily applied to any project, not just a brochure. Thanks so much for watching.